As we've worked with inequalities, you might have noticed, or inequalities with absolute values, you might have noticed that when we isolated the absolute value, it was always a positive number on the other side. What happens if there's a negative number on the other side? Well, it's surprisingly simple. So here's an example: absolute value of x minus 4 plus 3 is less than or equal to 0. So first let's isolate the absolute value. So move the 3 to the other side by subtracting 3 from both sides. We get absolute value of x minus 4 is less than or equal to minus 3. And then ask ourselves, how is it that the absolute value of something could be less than or equal to minus 3? So this absolute value on the left, whatever it is, it has to be positive because it's an absolute value, right? The absolute value forces it to be positive. So, and then the rest of the inequality says less than or equal to minus 3. Well, is it possible for a positive number to be less than or equal to minus 3? No, that's impossible. Positive numbers are all greater than or equal to minus 3. So this inequality that we just wrote down is impossible. That means that there are no solutions. There are no x values that we could put into this inequality to make it true. This inequality is just impossible. All right? So, and that happened because when we isolated the absolute value, we had a negative on the left-hand side, and also because this inequality was less than or equal to. So with the absolute value on the lesser side and a negative on the other side, that's impossible. Okay, second example. Let's solve this inequality. 4 less than or equal to 2 times y plus 3, or absolute value, 2 times absolute value of y plus 3, and then outside the absolute value, plus 5. So first, let's isolate the absolute value, subtract 5 from both sides. So on the left, we get minus 1, less than or equal to, on the right, 2 times the absolute value of y plus 3. So next, to isolate the absolute value, we should divide both sides by 2. So on the left, we get minus 1/2, less than or equal to, absolute value of y plus 3. Okay. And now we have to think about how could we make this happen. Well, the stuff on the right-hand side, on the greater side of this inequality, is the absolute value. And the absolute value, whatever it is, it's going to be positive, right? No matter what we put in there for y, the stuff coming out of this absolute value will be positive. And so the inequality says minus 1/2 is less than or equal to something positive. Well, it doesn't matter what the positive thing is, it will always be greater than or equal to minus 1/2, because negative 1/2 is negative, and the stuff coming out of the absolute value is definitely positive because it's coming out of an absolute value. And so this will always happen. This is always true. And what that means is, it doesn't matter what y value we plug into this inequality, excuse the bad handwriting, this inequality is always true. So any y value will make this inequality true. The way to write that down is that y, you could just write y equals anything, or you could write an interval that has all real numbers in it, and that would be the interval from minus infinity up to infinity. Those would be fine ways of describing what y values we're talking about. So, when you have, so the reason this happened is because once we isolated the absolute value, we had a negative on the other side, and the absolute value was on the greater side of the inequality. So what happens here is, if you have an inequality with an absolute value and a negative on the other side, you get either no solutions or everything is a solution, depending on whether the absolute value was on the greater side of the inequality or the lesser side of the inequality. Now you might be nervous, you might think that this is a lot to remember, but you don't have to memorize this stuff, right? Just picture a number line. Like here we had minus 1/2. Picture the number line with our minus 1/2 on there, and just ask yourself, also, this absolute value is going to be positive stuff over here, and just ask yourself, when is this true or is this false? Well, this is true because the negative is less than or equal to the positive stuff. So you don't have to memorize a bunch of stuff. Just think through what is happening on the number line and figure out what is happening rather than just memorizing. All right, that's it for now.